So welcome to the second day of our conference. It's great to see so many of you back here with us in the room today. And for those joining us on the live stream, again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you as well. Now, as I said, this is the second day of our conference. If you happen to have not joined us yesterday, we do have translation available. There are headsets in the back of the room for French and Spanish. So please do make use of those headsets if you so require. We will begin in just a moment with our first session. You can see our panelists are already seated and waiting. I just want to make a few points very quickly. Some of you hopefully will be joining for the cocktail reception at the Bonn mayor's office this early evening at 6 o'clock is when that begins. We encourage you to please join. The mayor's office has extended the kind invitation. Everyone can meet here if you'd like at 5:30 at the reception in order to make it to the mayor's office by 6. And the organizers of the conference are providing transport passes. So you can go to reception starting at around noon and find transport passes so that everyone can take the metro together, and that transport will be taken care of by the organizers of the conference. So at the reception starting at noon, you'll find those passes. And if you want to join for the cocktail reception, please join us here down at the reception at 5:30. So that's after the last session today. Great. So with no further ado, I would like to get to our first session of the day, featuring the perspectives of the different types of stakeholders concerned in the governance of TVET systems. I'm going to hand over to our host sitting in the middle there, our moderator for this session, Mr. Friedrich Hübler, who is the head of UNESCO-UNEVOC. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sumi, and good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the first day of the conference. Looking forward to the second day with, I hope, as insightful and informative sessions as yesterday. As Sumi said, this session now is about governance. TVET and skills development are expected to address economic, social, and environmental demands by helping youth and adults develop the skills and competencies that they need to contribute to the transition to equitable, inclusive, digital, and green economies. In the run-up to the Transforming Education Summit that took place in New York in September, UNESCO led the preparation of a discussion paper on learning and skills for work, life, and sustainable development. This paper emphasizes the roles of the different stakeholders in TVET, both public and private, including teachers, administrators, learners and their families, governments, employers, and workers' organizations. The new UNESCO strategy for TVET, in line with the 2015 recommendation concerning TVET, also places a great emphasis on the need for transparent and inclusive governance in order to develop skills for sustainable and inclusive economies. In this session, we will gather the perspectives from different stakeholders concerned with the governance of TVET systems. And as you see, we have a diverse panel where we will hear about the roles of teachers, learners, regulators, and enterprises. And we'll start with, I will introduce the panelists as I ask questions to them. We'll start with Derika Kohn. She is a third-year student in Temasek Polytechnic, which is a member of the UNEVOC network, and she pursues there a diploma in communication design. She's also currently the president of Temasek Polytechnic Ambassadors for the academic year 2022-2023, and I believe you're also the youngest panelist at this conference, so welcome, Derika. You were recently selected as Youth Ambassador for Temasek Polytechnic's World Youth Skills Day initiative, where one of the key topics that was explored was the role of government and decision makers in supporting youth skills development. Could you tell us what inspired you to get involved?
Thank you for the question. A key initiative under the World Skills Day Asia Pacific region was the inaugural Youth Ambassadors Program, spanning across 5 months, having 67 youth ambassadors across 11 different countries in the Asia Pacific region. It allows youth like myself to exchange ideas and views on skills for the future and the future of work, and we met regularly on a monthly basis virtually. So what inspired me to actually get involved in this program was that it was a platform for youths like myself to share views as well as aspirations for the future and to connect with like-minded peers and understand their learning environments better. Through participating in this program, I learned that firstly, it's vital for youths, regardless of their background, to openly express their views and opinions and perspectives. And youths must continually upskill themselves, having that tenacity in learning and to have that innate curiosity for new knowledge. And lastly, is to remain empathetic and listen to others in humility, for it's only by listening to others then we can better understand their perspectives on certain issues.
Thank you, Derika. One reason why we have here is because we also wanted to hear specifically from youth. So this is an opportunity for you to address everyone in this room, where you have many stakeholders from in the field of TVET, including representatives from governments, training providers, and enterprises. Can you tell us what they can do to help you and your peers acquire the skills that are needed for today's economy and society?
It is very important for the government, training providers, and enterprises to work together to ensure that the learning curriculum of the students of today can be updated regularly and to ensure that the acquired skill sets that we learn in school can meet the market demands. TVET stakeholders can also work together to provide more internship opportunities across different industries. Internship is one of the ways that allows students like myself to assess our career choices, pick up skills not learned in school, as well as to prepare for the working world. A close partnership between the government, training providers, and enterprises is required for such arrangements to be successfully implemented in the country. And with the support of the Singapore government, polytechnics like Temasek Poly allows us to partner with companies to provide internship opportunities for all students, and it's mandatory for every student in a polytechnic to undergo internship. There are various ways in which TVET stakeholders can help youth acquire these required skills. And on this note, I'm very proud to share that the World Skills Day Asia Pacific Youth Ambassadors have prepared a youth declaration to provide views on youth and skills to all TVET stakeholders. And it's a document to call for actions by the various stakeholders, including policymakers, educators, and industry players to address our concerns and aspirations for the future.
Thank you, Derika. Our second speaker is Afero Ismail. He's an associate professor at the Department of Engineering Education at University Tun Hussein On in Malaysia, which is also a member of the UNEVOC network. Afero is the head of the UTHM Digital Innovation Center and also the UNEVOC Center coordinator. UTHM participated recently in the UNEVOC Network Co-Action Initiative that you already heard about a few times. This is an initiative by UNEVOC where we bring together different members of the UNEVOC network to work on topics of joint interest. Afero, you have worked closely with TVET teachers and instructors in your country, Malaysia, and in other countries in South and Southeast Asia implementing this co-action initiative that I just mentioned. What are the priorities for teacher training to ensure that TVET remains relevant and of high quality?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Friedrich, for the question. So I, on behalf of the UNEVOC Center, UTHM, would like to say thank you to the UNESCO-UNEVOC for giving us the opportunity to be part of the co-action project in the previous year. So as you mentioned about the training needs by the teachers to make them relevant until today's world. So I would like to talk in regards of our project that we have implemented during last year until this year, that we did a study regarding on the TVET teachers in 5 countries members, which is altogether out of the UNEVOC members. So from Iran, Maldives, Indonesia, China, and also Malaysia. So we did a research regarding what are the training needs required by the teachers. So since that we did the research during the pandemic, so of course it comes out that the teachers need more on the digital competency. So when talking about digital competency, we can see that the most important or the most sought after skills training that they need are how to develop the digital content. How to actually to deliver digital materials to their students. But surprisingly, actually, apart from the digital competency training, they also need what we call this a social support, which is we want the teachers to become a good motivator. They want to be a good facilitator or maybe a counselor, because we do understand that during that moment, there are so many students actually drop out from school. We want to keep them in the system. So this is actually, we miss out during our training. We just targeting to make sure that we complete the syllabus in time. But at the same time, the children are suffering, you know, because some of them actually comes from disadvantaged background when talking about TVET. So most of them actually, their parents lost their job during the pandemic. So a teacher is not just about to teach the students, but also to motivate them, to complete their studies at the end, to get employed to the real industry.
And related to that, what can we do to make teachers, say, active and engaged partners in well-functioning TVET systems?
In response to the question, that I believe that we do understand that teachers are adults, and based on our observation from all those countries, we have a similar common problem, which is they are being imposed so many job tasks and responsibility, which is a burden to the teachers, not just for teaching, but on the clerical work and many others. So I think there should be a support system that we need to understand that each of the teachers have different needs and at the different stages of their career. For example, young teachers or junior teachers might need different type of training, but for the senior teachers, for example, in this today's world, we can see that they are very lack of digital competency. So this kind of training we need to address uniquely for each of the person. And another thing is that I believe that we can implement this in many other countries, which is the engagement with industries. So we have one initiative being implemented in Malaysia. We call that structured internship program, which is we send the teachers to industries for a certain period. So at that moment, they will learn on how the real situation in industries, and at the same time, when they get back to the school, they will strengthen the collaboration between institution and industries. So I think we will benefit from that very, very much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So we've heard now about some perspectives of the roles of learners and teachers and the expectations and how we can serve their needs. I also wanted to mention to those who are following online, we'll come later in the session, we hope to take questions from the audience. So of course here, when you're here, you can raise your hand, but if you're joining us online, please put your questions in the chat and we will then try to select some of those that you can ask to the panel. We'll now move on to a different level with Manuela Prina. She's from the European Training Foundation, where she's the head of the Skills Identification and Development Unit. ETF is, of course, the agency that supports countries outside of the European Union in the area of human capital development, lifelong learning policies, and skills identification and development. Manuela, what are the main policy measures promoted by ETF for better governance in its TVET reform policy agenda, and can you mention some examples of successful reforms?
Thank you. This is a very dense question for 9 a.m. in the morning. So please follow me, stay with me. I want to say that on one side, there are things that we have been repeating, but not only the ETF, I think all of us here in the room. That is like a mantra when we talk about good governance of TVET. And we are still far from being in an ideal world. So when we talk about good governance and we talk about the cooperation among actors, in particular social dialogue, employers being involved, trade unions, and also teachers and trainers to be involved in the policy cycle, we know that any country and system we pick, we will find this recommendation in any review we do of the system. So I would say that those ingredients that are part of a good governance of TVET, we know that it takes a really big effort from the side of the system to continue, believe, trust, and invest in, I would say, what are the basic ingredients of a good governance. And we don't have to give up. So it's not that because there are news in terms of TVET mechanism, those things are not important anymore. They are actually the fundamental of a good governance for TVET. But definitely there are some important news, especially as we are moving strongly to a perspective of lifelong learning. And as we see TVET actually covering much more needs and also being requested to deliver on many different groups and aspirations, including a high demand on adapting for the green and digital transition, but also for the changing needs of the industry and the services and all economic sectors. So what are those good practices? The first is that I would mention is the role of civil society organizations that enter very much in the game of governance, much more than before, because of their role in reaching out and also covering informal and non-formal training opportunities that we know are extremely important to engage the population in lifelong learning and also reach out to adults. The second is the private sector, not only as an actor that provides advice to the TVET, but as a provider itself and as a protagonist of lifelong learning. And the third dimension that I want to mention is what I call the impact investment. So the partnership amongst different actors, including financial actors, that is targeting a specific objective in a country, in a region, in a city. And this is probably the other important dimension of governance, which is the multi-level governance that comes in the picture. Now, the question on good practices. We heard yesterday somebody said that system change is always our aspiration, and it's an aspiration that has a destiny to fail, and I hope we're all aware of that, because system change is a wave. For me, it's something that we continue aspiring for it. But it's evolving, so we will never be happy. I think this is the destiny of people working in human capital, no? We are never happy, and we always have something to do, so we will never be unemployed somehow, which is a good news. But we have many good practices, and I think not only the ETF, but all international players are trying to capturing these good practices through really bringing forward those examples. And I would mention from the ETF side 3 of those examples, the first are the centers of vocational excellence, which is a big wave of change and good practices. ETF has been facilitating a network at international level that now has more than 250 centers of vocational excellence across 50 countries. And I think if you read what each of those centers does in terms of partnership, in terms of change, in terms of governance, there you find really a good story for each of them. The second is the green skills. We said yesterday we don't know yet what are the green skills. We don't have a taxonomy, but we have practices, many of them. We have done for 2 years a Green Skills Award, again at the global level, identifying more than 30 good practices from India to the Philippines to Nigeria to the Netherlands. And we will repeat it next year. And again, if you look into those practices, you have a story around governance, which is extremely diverse, but is representing a good example. And the third is around innovative teaching and learning, something that we always think is not really happening in the system. However, this year we launched for the first year a call for experiences in innovative teaching and learning, covering youth and also adults, and we received almost 800 applications. And it was very difficult to select only 5 to bring to the final stage. So I think that we really need, and this is probably something that at system level and in terms of good governance, we are still need to move a bit, which is to learn from practices, because there is where we have the experience and the examples that can inspire more change to happen across the system. I'll stop here.
You just mentioned that you work in many different countries. You gave some examples, Philippines, Nigeria. You talked about your network of centers of vocational excellence. I was wondering, because you work with so many countries, what do you see that is missing perhaps in these countries and say the development of, or the management, or how we can better manage TVET systems based on the experience that you have in these countries? What's missing there?
Okay. First, I say that for me, it's, I always also delete from reports the word missing or it has to improve. Because I recognize that across all countries there is an immense effort. As we said yesterday, TVET, despite everything we have done, is still an area which is, we have difficulties to reach really an attention that then moves investments and the system forward. But for me, what we have to reflect in all the countries is some dilemmas. I think we are in a moment of dilemmas. One dilemma is control versus diversification. So we want more people to be involved in learning, so education and training across age group, across different needs, youth that are outside, so needs, people who are not in education or in training, adults who are working and need upskilling and reskilling, adults that are looking for a job and need maybe another type of itinerary. And we want to have more in the system, but we also want to continue with the control we exercise or we used to exercise on formal education and training. So that's a dilemma that we need to solve for policymakers, letting go and amplifying versus control. The second dilemma, I would say, is quality versus quantity. Again, it's not that we need to give up on quality because we have more quantity in terms of education and training, but there is a moment where we will not be super happy. You know that something that is very important in the context of lifelong learning is micro-credentials. And micro-credentials, I think it's an area where we see these dilemmas in action, no? Control versus letting go, quantity versus quality. There is something that we need to reflect. And the third dilemma that I would name is impact and trust versus fear of failure, which is something that I think impacts on us as policy shapers and policymakers very much. Now, we are in a moment in the history, I would say, of education and training where we need impact and trust, including working with many different actors that before were not part of the governance of the system. For example, civil society organizations, youth organizations, parents. So we need many more communication lines. And if we have a fear of failure, we will not move forward. So I think these are the three things that beyond the usual recommendations of improving partnerships, social dialogue, and involvement of actors, we really need to reflect upon as policymakers and policy shapers.
Thank you, Manuela. Thomas Schröder is professor at TU Dortmund University, where he's also the chair of the UNESCO chair of TVET and competence development for the future of work. Thomas, Manuela just touched upon the role of the private sector. I was wondering if you could tell us more about the role of the private sector. We know they have an important role as training providers, but also as employers that demand specific skills. Can you speak about the contribution of the private sector based on your experience?
Yeah, thank you very much for this very important question. For quality of TVET, of course, is inevitable. We need private sector. I will maybe later on give some insight about what they are doing on the micro level, how they are contributing towards quality and why. Of course, the private sector has an interest in having a highly qualified workforce, which can be employed in a very flexible manner, preferably. And if you really mean it about sustainability in a global context, if we want to achieve this as a goal, we won't achieve this without the private sector. So TVET basically has a dual function here. Sustainability, ecological, economic, and social sustainability is something which needs to be included in order to change the mindset of those who undergo a TVET program. At the same time, it's systemically extremely relevant as a very complex educational sector, which itself contributes through sound TVET programs, through offering career pathways, through enabling individuals to earn a decent income and a respected place in society. It's important for all societies to offer this to the majority of the population, if not to all. So especially when I look at initial TVET programs, it's, I think, a means of sustainability to have programs which are sound and which exceed a few weeks. Sometimes we have those short-lived and short-time skills development programs which are maybe in a very short-sighted interest of some of the industries, but those who offer longer programs will in the end profit from quality, from an enhanced competitiveness, and that's what the industry is interested in. So some of them really invest a lot and really make an effort. We witnessed yesterday what our colleagues presented. It's amazing, I believe, very outstanding, and I think if we want to create sustainable societies, we need to make sure how we can include more than we do at the moment the private sector into TVET programs. Excellent approaches, excellent initiatives, and this needs to be strengthened. And I often sense it's not unwillingness, it's rather being a little uninformed about all the options which are there, or even missing options and structures which need to be provided by the society. Thank you.
Maybe can you elaborate a bit more? What are some of the enabling conditions for private sector cooperation in TVET?
I think the most important factor, what I observe, is the basis must be mutual trust. So the companies, the economy must trust that it's in the interest of the entire society to achieve something with respect to quality education, which will serve the entire society. So basically same objectives. One of the main objectives always is to achieve excellence in TVET, which increases competitiveness. But sometimes it's incentives, of course, financial incentives, tax reduction, or even laws and regulations. I came across very recently the new draft new reporting standards by EU. You probably are informed about this, which is quite interesting. It's called the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, and will be enacted, I think, in 2024, which basically means that 14,000 German enterprises and companies will have to report according to those standards. At the moment, we don't even have the personnel to achieve this goal. But there's one disclosure requirement, S1-9. It's about training and skills development indicators of the companies, which is an approach. And I'm really looking forward to see how this will impact activities of the companies with respect to sustainability of TVET systems. Thank you.
I would like to connect this a bit to the UNESCO TVET strategy. This is the main reason why we are gathered here for these 2 days, the launch of this strategy. And I would like to ask all panelists the same question. Could you maybe give us, from your specific perspective, one key recommendation on how the government of TVET systems can be improved and how UNESCO can support this process? We'll start with you, Derika.
Well, I think that participatory governance is very important, and that means hearing the voices and opinions of the public from the ground. Within Singapore's context, it could be seen as public consultation processes within different community centers, grassroots organizations, as well as with members of parliament, where the public could raise their concerns to the government. In the TVET system context, it could be seen as annual surveys or dialogue sessions with youths and students like myself from different institutes of learning to gather feedback and to understand their perspectives on certain issues happening. In this way, UNESCO could hear directly from the youths while enhancing participatory governance in the process. Youth should lastly be involved because their voices, our voices and opinions matter. And youths are the next generation to be leading the nation as well as the world forward, and we are the ones impacting the future generations to come. Thus, all perspectives, opinions, and voices should be heard to better improve the existing initiatives and programs being run, and to find ways to improve the lives of the next generation. Thank you.
Mafiro?
All right. I would like to second what Derika said about the involvement of the many stakeholders into the system. So I believe we can refer to triple or quadruple helix, that we need to integrate all those stakeholders into one system to make them available and accessible into our current governance. And we did a study before that. I'm talking about the TVET teachers, a curriculum. So we found that they are lacking of future skills in the current curriculum. What we are teaching them is about the current or existing knowledge or skill that we need to integrate into the teachers, but how about the future skills? So I believe that while taking into consideration the comments and feedback from the industries and the stakeholders, and of course now we are focusing on the comments and feedback from the family, from the community. So these are important stakeholders to put together to strengthen our governance system.
Same question to you, Manuela.
Yeah, maybe I focus on one point, which is about the governance and the unlocking investments. Something that we see is that as we talk about the sectors, and we know that also the economic challenges and the change in the world of work is extremely fast and demanding. We also know that, for example, from the European Commission, there are many funds that go into sector programs, including targeting skills. But for example, I'll give you an example from the Western Balkan region. We were talking with DG Agriculture, and they were saying, we have funds, but we don't have projects. We don't have requests to use those funds. So we need to fill this gap between investing in skills, which is an aspiration, let's say, of countries and also sectoral policies, and working with the actors in the sectors to bring in the skills dimension, which is something that, I mean, has always been there, but not as demanding as now. So I think we have a role to play, and UNESCO has a role to play in unlocking investments by bringing people together and trying to really understand how we can make this happen.
Thank you. I hope that this conference is a partial response to that, what you just said, by bringing people together and agreeing on a goal. And I think this is also very valuable advice for UNESCO. Thomas, again, the same question to you.
Thank you. Well, that's a very difficult question, and most of it has already been said. So, but I think what we need to rethink again and again is one of the main problems is societal reputation of TVET programs and the outcome. That's something that needs to be tackled in one way or the other. And saying this with respect to ongoing digitalization. This might offer a pathway to new forms of learning, a new learning organization. I think we must overcome some traditions, and we need to create best practice examples and to disseminate them. So this is a role where UNESCO and UNESCO-UNEVOC is extremely important. Identify best practice, disseminate, and make it available to a broad public. Thank you.
I would like to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions. This is, again, both to the people who are with us in the room, but also those who are joining online. And I think we have some questions online already. Sumi, please.
Indeed, there's one question that's come in from our online participants, from Tawanda Chinengundu, who asks, what would be the best method of training TVET teachers for secondary schools?
Maybe Afreya, you could respond to that question.
I believe that the question is referred to me. So thank you for the questions you mentioned about is the best method to teach the secondary school. So I believe that the students from the secondary schools are youth, yeah, young people from the age of around 13 to 17. So when the transition towards the different of generation, so these young people into this world are different from our world, from our from previous education. So we have heard about multiple mechanisms or multiple methods that we can use to implement to teach this kind of students. So one of the best examples is we are now moving towards the student center, not any longer teacher center. So in that case, we have to integrate multiple methodologies such as problem-based learning or if we're talking about the STEM, inquiry-based learning, so those are the things that we need to put together into our teaching and delivery. But when talking about the technology, so I believe that even our kids today are really literacy in using the mobile phones and the technology devices. So in order to engage the student very well in the session, we need to plan some activity by using the technology. So I believe that is an additional value to make them focus, and at the end, we would like them to achieve the learning outcome. during the session. Thank you.
So I see some hands in the audience. I think, Margarita, you were first, and please state your name, your affiliation, and your country.
Okay, I'm Margarita Pavlova from the Education University of Hong Kong, China, and I have a question to Manuela. You said that you identified these interesting green practices and giving the awards. So what sort of aspects are you using to evaluate these practices? And can you tell something about the pedagogy? What sort of, have you noticed any interesting pedagogy that has been used by these participants or awardees? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, those practices are extremely diverse, so they cover skills and in terms of skills provision, but also in the world of work, so looking at how training happens, for example, in companies. So one of the things we look at is, in fact, the green dimension, which is not always easy to identify, so to make sure that there is a purpose in terms of addressing a challenge or a need which is connected to green. The second is the partnership element. This is something we always look at, so we award practices that have a collaboration among different actors. And the third is the impact, is the change that they are bringing in the society. In terms of pedagogy, and I have to say that this is something that it's also in the good practices that we are collecting on innovative teaching and learning, for sure the student-centered approach is extremely important. The second is the use of digital technology in support, so not as a purpose, but as a support to a pedagogical objective. And I think that makes a big difference. In the pandemic, we all learned that, in fact, digital is not per se a solution. In fact, we have I think, data on actually polarization, exclusion that has been brought in the moment where we all moved to a digital provision. So in these practices, instead, we see the use of digital in support to the pedagogical objective. And there are many practices, so I really invite you to look at them because each of them has a different story. We can catch up during the coffee break.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning. Tim Schreiber from the European Commission. One way of organizing the governance of VET that we promote very much at EU level is through dual VET, through apprenticeship systems in particular, which we think is a very good way to also involve the private sector very closely. I would be interested in hearing your views, how much this is also a model that can be well implemented in other parts of the world, what are specific challenges maybe, and yes, voilà, thank you.
I will put that question to Thomas.
Thank you very much for this excellent question. Yeah, I think my personal opinion, is I don't see a reason why it shouldn't be possible to implement a dual system in other countries. But you need a long breath, and to think in cycles of a 3-year development program is not sufficient. So there are more sometimes practical hurdles than to development. But there are some examples. Look at Malaysia, for example. They have a beautiful dual system. In Peru, we have approaches with Senati resources. We heard this yesterday. And one has to be very patient, and one has to be aware of the fact that only 20% of the companies in Germany is decreasing the number of companies who are involved in dual system because we have a changing economy. And new economies, for example, are those, are operated by people like in the IT sector. mainly operated by people who underwent a study program at university. So if you approach them and say, why don't you introduce some dual programs in your company? You can save a lot of money and it makes sense. It's very practice oriented. They say, no, we don't need this because we have enough money. So we take those from university and they undergo a training program. So it's basically, you need to change the culture, and that applies as well to dual programs. At the same time, we see that dual study programs in Germany are exploding at the moment because there's a strive for higher education, but at the same time, many companies want to be included in such study programs. So that's a success story, has been a success story in recent years. And yeah, my personal opinion with respect to quality, if you want, if of course it's always increasing the quality. You can learn at a workplace, in company workplace. You can learn things. You can learn how to work under time constraints. You have real colleagues and who want you to deliver quality. You have real customers. All this cannot be simulated. So you learn something here which you cannot learn in a vocational college and which you cannot learn in a vocational training center. And maybe one more word to this question of vocational teachers, because it's a very complex matter. And I once was working in a working group and I was explaining to them as an expert for vocational teachers that one has to make up its mind. How do you want to educate them? Do you want a TVET system which is based on bottom-up processes, where you allow your teachers to shape and to create the learning environment and their own work environment? Or do you want more the kind of obedient person? And the answer was, oh, that's a very complex and complicated question, and we don't want to discuss this. Too complex, too complicated. And I would just please have in mind, TVET is complicated and TVET is complex, and there is no one single solution. We need many solutions, and even in one country, if we have one solution which works well in one sector, it doesn't necessarily mean that it can be transferred in this one country to another sector. Maybe you need a different solution in another sector. So we need to be aware of this. Yes, it's complex, but that's what basically I think is fun. It's challenged to have a complex problem here, and TVET obviously is a very complex system and a complex problem. Thank you.
Can I add something to the questions? Please. So I would like to share our institution experience. This is the critical challenge that we're facing now is in the context of curriculum. So let's say we are sending students to the industries. We cannot send the total 30 students to the same industries. So we need to separate them, divide them into several industries. But the most difficult challenge is to make a standard between those industries, because it's a structured curriculum. So what they learn in that industry is different from these industries. So this is quite a challenge for us to measure the quality after the end of the program.
Thank you. Maybe on that note, we'll close. I think the last message that we had was that there's a lot of complexity in TVET systems, in the governance of TVET systems. If I want to maybe summarize the ambition of the new UNESCO strategy for TVET in a nutshell, it's the transition to more inclusive and sustainable economies and societies. For this, it's necessary for all stakeholders to contribute and to come together. But we also learned from this panel that there is a large diversity in these stakeholders, and they have very different needs and the context in which they operate. Starting with the learners, they can be young people like Derek here, they could be adults who are in continuing education, and all the way to the upper level where we have countries in a very different financial and economic situation. I hope that an event like this, and this is also what we learned, this is the role for UNESCO, can help us bring some of these different perspectives together, so that we can work jointly on this common ambition of TVET systems that are as excellent as they can be. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
And thank you, Friedrich, for your moderation of that very interesting session and for your questions as well. I'll let the panelists take their seats again. We are going to take a short break, but I just wanted to take the opportunity at this point to recognize and highlight one of our guests. Her Excellency, Ms. Sadoka Tsirikova, is the Vice Minister of Higher and Secondary Specialized Education of Uzbekistan, and she's joining us this morning. So welcome to you. Thank you for being here with us today. On that note, we have the chance to take a coffee break. We want to begin again at 10 a.m. So please join us back here in the room at 10 for our next session. We're going to take a look at some TVET flagship projects. So we'll see you at 10. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Come on in and take your seats if you're just trickling in so we can get started. We have our panelists, as you can see, seated already. Okay, let's begin. If I can ask for your attention, let's begin. So in this session, we're going to speak about ongoing and upcoming TVET flagship initiatives, including projects by UNESCO and its field offices and partners as well. So to highlight this session, we have our moderator who is in the center here of this panel, and I'd like to hand over to Mr. Hubert Giesen, the Regional Director and Representative for the UNESCO Regional Office for Eastern Africa. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sumi, and good morning, dear colleagues and friends. Can you, those in the back, please take your seat? I'm sorry that this was just a technical break. It seems there was no coffee, but we will, of course, respect your basic human right for access to coffee later. So please take your seats so we can start with this session. Those in the back, can you please take your seat? All right. Session number 4, which is on TVET flagship initiatives addressing multiple transitions. And it's composed of 2 panel sessions. So this is the first of the 2, which is focused on the green transformation. And this will be followed at 11 with a session on the digital transformation. I invite 4 panelists to speak in this session. We have 3 present here, lined up on the podium. I will introduce them later. And there is 1 panelist online, that is our good friend and partner, Dr. Langat, the director of the TVET Authority in Kenya. And he is joining us via a video link. So let me first check, Dr. Langat, can you hear us? Can you see us? Are you there?
Good morning, everyone, and I'm joining you from Nairobi. I can hear you very well.
Thank you, Dr. Langat. Habari za asubuhi.
Salamu sana.
Sawa sawa. Tutaendelea.
Karibu.
Asante.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much for joining us. You're on the screen in the main room. So first, a few comments to introduce this panel session on green transition. Now, I've looked in the room. None of you is old enough to have been there, but many of you will have heard about the game-changing 1972 United Nations Conference on the Environment, which was held in Stockholm. And this was really the first time that environmental issues were placed on top of the international agendas and concerns, really. It also constituted the meeting which resulted in the creation of UNEP. And remember, I'm based in Nairobi, so earlier this year we celebrated 50 years of existence of UNEP. That was a big event, of course. And so 50 years ago, where have we gone since 50 years ago? Since then, I would say the attention to the issue of sustainable development has significantly grown to become now a global priority for all nations and for humanity at large. And this is captured now in the very ambitious Agenda 2030 and its 17 game-changing SDGs, which are aimed, and I quote from the title of the document that was endorsed by the General Assembly, transforming our world. So that sets the ambition. And therefore, in this session, the two topics, the green transition and the digital transition. Now, in addition to the climate change and environmental crisis, we have seen the emergence really of other global crises, on health, of course, the COVID pandemic, migration affecting a lot of countries here in Europe, conflicts, corresponding effects of these conflicts on inflation and energy security. And I think all of this calls for multiple transitions to happen simultaneously, as also, in fact, is expressed in this complex Agenda 2030. I strongly believe that education could be a most powerful way to integrate all dimensions of this complex agenda, and it can help to turn challenges into opportunities, really. A successful green transition requires collective action and responsibility from all the world's citizens. It requires changing mindsets, but also attitudes and rethinking of unsustainable consumption and production patterns. It calls for an upscaling of education for sustainable development, and that is at all levels. In basic education, in TVET, in tertiary and higher education, and in fact in lifelong learning approaches. Now for TVET, the ambition must be twofold in this regard. First, to build the right skills and capacities to drive the green transition. In other meetings, I have said that in talking about green transformation, in particular in Africa, I've said what would be the first bottleneck? And it's not finance. I mean, we have seen what finance can be made available when we had the COVID pandemic. It's not political will. It is not the management capacity. It is actually the technical skills. That is the first bottleneck that we will see in this green transition. And then the second ambition for TVET must be to ensure also that TVET institutions become digitized and green, and they become showcases of sustainability themselves. Now, in this panel, we want to hear from ongoing TVET flagship initiatives to identify success factors, best practices, and new ideas to support a successful and just transitions. So let me go to the panel now, and I invite the first panelist on my left, Dr. Jefferson Azevedo from Brazil, to maybe share some insights. First, to introduce Dr. Azevedo, he is the rector of the Fluminense Federal Institute and vice president for Americas of the World Federation of Colleges and Polytechnics. He is also the coordinator of the UNESCO-UNEVOC Center, of the National Council of the Federal Network of TVET Institutions. He holds a PhD in Systems and Computing Engineering, and he has worked for over 27 years in professional and technical education. So, Dr. Azevedo, please tell us about the new Greening TVET Campus initiative that you are managing and implementing. I believe it's called Itaboraí, and this is offering green programs to adult learners. We're very eager to hear from you. The floor is yours.
First of all, Mr. Hubbard, I would like to say that I'm honored to the invitation to be here by the organization of the UNEVOC team. Thank you very much. And it's impossible I talk about A minute, please. Okay. It's impossible to say something about TVET in Brazil, and I wouldn't talk about our huge public network, national network, where 41 institutions with 670 campuses, with 1.5 million students, tuition free for all. It's a federal budget, and this was created because the great question in the last 20 years for us was how to reach all the people that needed the skills to be in the better position in the world of work. Next one. And I will cut this great country in Rio de Janeiro state, in the countryside of the Rio de Janeiro state, where is my institution, where I am a professor and I'm a director in the countryside of the Rio de Janeiro state, and we will talk about one campus that will open next month, the Itaboraí campus. Please, next one. I try to. Okay. This is a specialized campus, is an energy and sustainability campus. Probably it's, we have a little bit campus in the 617 in Brazil that is so specialized. Next, please. Okay. This main focus is energy and sustainability. And we learn with the UNESCO-UNEVOC, with the greening TVET structure, the 5 dimensions of the greening TVET, and we will implement in this campus the infrastructure, the greening curriculum and training, the greening research projects, the greening community workplace, and greening the institutional culture. And the target audience, the main target audience is the adults and young adults in this place. Sorry. Okay. I will do a minute, please. Here, all the technician course is have a new curriculum approach. Is a formative pathway in micro-credentials, and here is an example of 4 modules of our course, and the question is how to prepare, how to reconcile the work and study activities and schedule for the working students. It's a great challenge for all of us. And because that, we divided in 4 modules, and this pathway, the working students can attend one of this module, and 3 months next another, without time between them, but at the end, with 4 micro-credentials, they get a diploma as a technician in electrician here. This with the high school, because in Brazil, the technician level is a higher school level. And at the end of this pathway, they will get a diploma as a technician. It's so flexible curriculum to the working students. Another question for us is how to prepare professional with deeply knowledge and broad competence, broad skills. And because that, we have another pathway, is environmental vertical integration. We offer in the next 3 years the vertical modalities of our courses. The students came to our institution and do initial and continual education, for example, photovoltaic system installer, and then go to the technician level, and then go to the technician specialization, and then go to undergraduate degree, for example, to do the electrical engineer, and then go to the post-graduation or lato sensu specialization in renewable energy. And in this pathway, this vertical integration, it's possible to prepare a different kind of a profession to develop research project, develop new technologies, to dialogue with the community, to listen the demand of the society and put your knowledge in favor of the solutions of the product sector, the organization. And thank you very much. It's a little bit about our experience in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Azevedo, for sharing this very interesting initiative. I will come back with some questions later, but let us first hear from the second panelist. That's Dr. Langat. As we have seen, he is connected. I hope he is on the screen, or he will show up on the screen in a minute. So let me first introduce Dr. Langat. He is the Director General of the TVET Authority in Kenya. He has a wealth of experience of over 25 years from both public and private sectors. He is responsible for the implementation of TVET policies in Kenya. That's the TVETA mandate. And Dr. Langat holds a PhD in engineering systems and management from Egerton University. Dr. Langat is also a key ally in our BEAR2 flagship program on TVET in Kenya. Dr. Langat, could you tell us more about your experience in collaborating with UNESCO in making the BEAR project a success? The floor is yours, sir.
Albert and the team in Bonn. You rightfully introduced the subject and how UNESCO-UNEVOC has been advocating for the effective transition of knowledge and skills needed to promote climate change through mainstreaming of the knowledge and skills required to effect this transition. Ourselves as a country, we have been working very closely with the UNESCO and in UNEVOC in assisting us to put in place strategies that will be able to allow us to move this transition smoothly, to ensure that not only we have the right policies in place, but also to make sure that we have put in place the right team to make sure that we see this transitioning. Our emphasis has been on greening strategies to transform our learning and training environment so that we fulfill our role in skilling our learners, upskilling the professionals into the green jobs, and also reskilling those who are likely to lose their jobs into when we move to the green transition. As a country, what we did was to develop the policies and regulations around our curriculum development so that we have what we call the basic structure of our curriculum, where sustainability and greening is one. So in all our curriculum, be it in engineering, in business, in tourism, in entrepreneurship, we have the factor of greening and sustainability in our curriculum. This is to inculcate greening culture and sustainability in everything that we are doing in our institution. We have participated in the global debate and emphasizing on greening of occupation with a focus of high skills and well-paid jobs in the greening sector. And one of the example of the project that we are doing is the one that we are doing with the UNESCO on environmental sustainability, and we have developed 3 curriculum, level 3, level 4, and level 6 in solar PV. We have also equipped 6 TVET institutions across the country to implement this curriculum with the equipment for training in solar PV. What we are looking at is promoting the availability of these skills so that we encourage institutions, for example, towards to move towards transitioning to the greening by using the green technologies in their institution. If you go to most of our institutions at the moment, they are now embracing solar energy, especially in heating water in the student hostels, in their kitchen, and saving on the other sources of energy that will be maybe contributing to this. To this end, we have enrolled students in the new curriculum, and we are expecting in the next 1 year to have graduated the students with the skills in solar PV. And we have integrated entrepreneurship into this program so that some of them will go into business that will be promoting the use of green energy in our institution and in our homes. With this, we will be encouraging many households in the country and institutions to practice or utilize the green energy because of the availability of skills. The challenge that we have been having, other than the cost of solar, for example, being high, is the lack of skills for people who can maintain solar energy installation for those who are willing to do this. But where TVET is planning to produce as many of these technicians across the country, then we are seeing the uptake of solar utilization in the country going up and promoting to the green availability of the green jobs in Kenya. And finally, in the institution, what we are focusing more is the supply of workforce who will be in the forefront in dealing directly with the sustainable issues. We are saying TVET should embrace the green technology that is economically visible and environmentally friendly. If TVET cannot create new green technology, at least it should be able to support and adopt the technologies by preparing the future workforce who are aware of, capable of handling the technologies that support the greening of the job. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Langat, for sharing these insights. Let us start with some questions to the 2 first panelists, and I start with Dr. Langat as we have you on the screen. Now, a recent study of UNESCO shows that curricula in many countries are lacking information on environmental issues. I think the study showed that less than 50% of curricula documents made any reference to environmental issues. And my question is, what is in your opinion needed in terms of curriculum in the future design of TVET curricula to ensure the greening of skills and the qualifications of TVET graduates?
Thank you, Herbert. What we have done as a country is to develop competency-based education and training and assessment standards. And in those standards, structured what we call basic competencies. And in this case, we are bringing in addition to numeracy, literacy, we are bringing in digital skills and environmental skills. So it is forming part of our curriculum. And I mentioned, regardless of the field that curriculum is, because you deal with it, issues of sustainability in all aspects of our business undertaking, whether you are in engineering, hospitality, you are in entrepreneurship, you have one element or so of sustainability. Second is to be able to train new trainers who are curriculum developers in terms of drafting the new curriculum and working on sustainability. And thirdly, we are currently working on what we call greening awards by best practitioners in our institution. Other than encouraging them to plant trees in their campuses, we also are encouraging them to work on sustainable approaches in their activities, including waste management, because this is some of the places where we find to be a challenge, especially in our TVET institution. We use a lot of materials which, if not well handled, can bring some environmental degradation. So we expect this greening award to where institution will be competing on the best practices of adopting green practices to encourage more institutions to move towards that, including how they have implemented sustainable activities in their training programs. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Langat. And that is indeed a very comprehensive approach, and I think we can learn from that. Also knowing the education system in Kenya a bit and the recent reforms towards competency-based education, also in basic education, I believe an important aspect there is also that environmental education is integrated at the basic education level, so that you work on the mindset, awareness of young children. And when they come to your institutions, that they have already the right mindset to absorb this approach that you have developed at the TVET level. So thank you, Dr. Langat, for these valuable insights. Let me ask a question to Dr. Jefferson Azevedo. Now, as we know, education is really about foresight. We have to train today for the jobs of tomorrow. Now, what innovations do you foresee are needed for the TVET sector to be able to continue to meet the needs of the service and the industry sectors, which are the two most important sectors in Brazil? And they are key for today's Brazil economy. That on the one hand, while also increasing and looking at the upcoming transition, increasingly shifting towards building the required skills for the green transition. So how do you see that balance?
I think the world has a great challenge, especially in the post-pandemic era. The feeling is that the 2030 accelerating come to the 2022. A lot of things were anticipated, and our research shows in Brazil that we will need 10 million to skilling 10 million workers in the next 3 years only in industrial fields. 80 million with reskilling and upskilling, and 2 million in skilling. In the greening TVET, in green fields, for example, in photovoltaic area, we will need in the next years 600,000 new workers for this field. And this is a great challenge for Brazil. We need to align our federal TVET network with the state networks and the private networks to this great effort. And we will need the Minister of Education and the Minister of Labor to coordinate these great challenges for us. But I would like to highlight that we need a new profile of professional, of a new generation. We need a professional with high skills in new technologies because the intelligent technologies, robotization, automatization, and different materials. It's so important, deep knowledge. But we need another dimension that is a sustainable dimension in the profile, with a new mindset, a new behavior to do new projects and to think different. But I would like to highlight a third dimension, the humanity dimension. We need to prepare ethical people, people that will be prepared to live together with new values, solidarity, justice, to aim a culture of peace. And I think these three dimensions is a great challenge for all of our schools and for our education system.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this experience in Brazil. And you can really see from your answer this green transition brings challenges indeed, millions to be trained, retrained, but also opportunities, some 600,000 new jobs, green jobs in Brazil. Let me now turn to the third panelist, Marieke van der Weyer, Senior Policy Analyst at OECD. Marieke, thanks for joining us. Marieke van der Weyer is a Senior Policy Analyst in the OECD Center for Skills, where she leads the work on vocational education and training. She has been actively involved in the OECD's Getting Skills Right project, analyzing the match between skills demand on the one hand and supply. Marieke holds a PhD in economics from the University of Leuven in Belgium. Dr. van der Weyer, please tell us about the challenges of matching skills, demand, and supply. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hubert, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss with you the work that we are doing, that we have done on work-based learning and the green transition. As you can see here on the screen, we have a new report out on this. It came out on Monday, so very recent, and this is a collaboration between different international organizations, as you can see all of them on the screen here, through the interagency group on TVET. So first of all, let me thank the colleagues from the European Commission, ETF, CDFOP, the ILO, and UNESCO for the very fruitful collaboration on this leaflet. So what is this leaflet? So it's a very short document. It's only 16 pages, and that includes front and back cover, so really a very short document that sets out some of the broad opportunities of the green transition and work-based learning. So it discusses how skill needs are changing because of the green transition and what role work-based learning can play. And the purpose of the leaflet is really to put the spotlight on this topic and on the role that work-based learning can play. So it's a very accessible document without any technical terminology, and it's really meant for awareness raising. And my slides have disappeared for a second. So why looking at the green transition? I'll wait for them to come back, but of course I don't have to tell you why we need to look at it. The other panelists have been going through this already, so skill needs are definitely changing because of this. We need training of young people for the future labor market, for future societies, but also of adults who are already in the workforce. So when we talk about skills for the green transition, we had to come up with a definition, of course. We've heard this throughout the last couple of days. What are green skills? So this is the definition that we came up together with these 6 international organizations, and our approach was to put all our definitions, because we all have some form of definition already, to put them next to each other and see what are the common elements. So what do we all consider skills for the green transition? You can read it on the screen, so I won't go through much of the details, but just for you to know, we take a very broad perspective in this definition. So we include technical skills, so the skills that are needed to adopt more environmentally friendly working practices and technologies, but also transversal skills, so those linked to sustainable thinking and acting that are important in work and in life. So quite a broad perspective. So we're not talking here about just skills for green jobs. Those are important as well, and those are covered, but we're talking more broadly of skills that you also need in changing jobs, changing occupations. You'll see that we put skills for the green transition in brackets as well, because we say skills, but we actually mean skills, knowledge, abilities, values, attitudes, but it would have been a bit long to always use all these terminologies, so skills for the green transition. If we can go to the next slide. I have the thing.
Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. There it is. So why work-based learning specifically? So of course, there are many benefits to work-based learning, the most obvious one being that work-based learning gives the opportunity to immediately, directly be exposed to the new technologies in the workplace, the new work practices related to the green transition. Secondly, it also enables young people to be agents of change, as we say, because they are going from the school to the employer. They can bring the new practices from the employer back to the school. They can bring new thinking that they develop at the school to the workplace, as such fostering really this kind of peer knowledge exchange and mutual learning. And work-based learning, lastly, for adults, it's a very flexible way to learn and directly relevant for them, and which, of course, for adults, we know that they need this type of learning. So one last point that we cover in the leaflet as well are these enabling conditions that we've put here on the slide. So for work-based learning to play this role, to really support the green transition, we've identified a set of conditions that we think are necessary for it to really reach its potential. So you can see here, first one, skills intelligence. We need to know what is happening, how our skill needs changing due to the green transition, what are the skills for the green transition. We need coordination among stakeholders, and I'm definitely not the first to say it during this conference. We need to know, we need to align work-based learning with the policy priorities, with the needs of the employers and the needs of the learners. We need dialogue between the training companies and the providers, exactly to foster that knowledge exchange. We need skilled teachers and trainers, also something that came up in the session before. We need the commitment of companies, and that's an important point. So companies need to be committed to training young people, to training their workers, and committed to sustainability. So it really needs to be in their DNA to be involved in training and to be involved in sustainable practices. We need to be able to reach all learners through work-based learning, and that may require some additional support, some outreach efforts. And lastly, career guidance to help people understand that the green transition really is an opportunity, and to help them understand how they can develop the skills for the green transition. So the leaflet is available on the website of all of the agencies involved, and you have the link here as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marieke, for this very important report, and thanks for working hard to have the report launch just before this conference. I suggest that we put the QR code on the screen again at the end of the session, so that those who want to copy it have an opportunity to do so. Before I come back to you with some questions, let me invite the last panelist, last but not least, Dr. Apurva Shankar. She works for Circle Economy in the Netherlands. Ms. Shankar's work focuses on the impact of circular strategies on jobs and skills, and she has a double master's in public policy and human development from Maastricht University and from the United Nations University. Ms. Shankar, please enlighten us on the role of TVET in really building and driving a circular economy. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hubert, and also want to start by thanking the UNESCO team and also congratulating them on the launch of their TVET strategy. I'm going to start off by introducing my work a little bit and my organization. So as Dr. Hubert mentioned, I work in Circle Economy. So Circle Economy is basically an impact organization based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And we're a group of 50 passionate experts who work on, our aim is basically to accelerate the transition to a just and inclusive circle economy through practical and scalable insights and solutions. So we've been around in this space for over 10 years, and over the course of this time, we have supported over 80 businesses, 30 cities, and 20 national agencies, as well as multilateral organizations, foundations, as well as civil society organizations. So my work specifically is within the Circular Jobs Initiatives team in Circular Economy. So the Circular Jobs team is like a knowledge center within Circular Economy. And what we really focus on is how can we make the circular transition positive for workers and the workforce? So how can we make sure that workers are at the heart of the circular transition? So to come a little bit into the project that we did, so this was a project that we did that we're actually doing with UNESCO-UNEVOC. And the project is on upskilling TVET on circular economy for post-pandemic recovery. Now, the rationale of the project, I think, is pretty clear. Also, through our discussions over the last 2 days, we do recognize that, especially in this post-pandemic world, upskilling youth has become extremely important. Skilling, upskilling, reskilling, all of those. And this is important for us to build back better and also to enable resilience. So our project basically has 2 objectives. It is targeted towards TVET personnel to raise their professional and institutional capabilities, because the idea is that we want them to adopt circular practices and integrate this into their curriculum. And our project is also targeted towards TVET graduates and students to enhance their competencies and also to work in areas related to the circular economy and related to inclusive, green, and resilient post-pandemic recovery. So what we have done as part of the project is we developed a training of trainers on circular economy. So to tell you how we arrived at this actual training of trainers, so I think the first step really for us was, it was very important for us to also have a continuous dialogue with the institutions that we were working with. I think that was also something that was mentioned in the previous presentation about enabling conditions. So we were in constant touch with the UNESCO-UNEVOC centers, and we had surveys, we had meetings, we had ongoing discussions, and we really identified what their priority areas are. So during a kickoff meeting that we had at the beginning of the project, we identified that there are several entry points for circular economy, but entrepreneurial learning is a particularly viable one, and hence our training was designed and developed with this lens. We also found, based on feedback from TVET institutions, that it is helpful to integrate the topic and to introduce the topic more in as a broader concept that can be integrated across different subjects. So therefore, our training was designed from a broad lens, not targeting any particular sector or any particular focus area, but more as a general introductory module on circular economy. So finally, our training happened, it was conducted in September 2022, and we reached 80 educators from 8 institutions across 6 countries in Africa. And these are just a few of, a few pictures from the events that we had. So the first is from the kickoff meeting that I just mentioned, where we really found out what the priorities of the institutions are. The second picture is from the actual, training that happened in September. And so the process didn't end with the training. We wanted to follow up also with a webinar, with a session to basically see how have learners actually, understood all these concepts and how are they planning to integrate it into their curriculum. So we had a post-learning webinar as well quite recently in October. This is also just a snapshot from that. So what we found in the post-learning webinar was very interesting. So institutions highlighted 3 areas that they see circular economy being integrated into their curriculum. So the first one is promotion of lifelong learning. So over here, what we found is that, basically institutions also plan to, plan to modify their curriculum to integrate circular concepts. Another area that was mentioned is that institutions prioritizing circular economy as a strategic research area. And the third is also, knowledge sharing and capacity development forums, because it's not just important to research about these subjects, but also to share, to have knowledge sharing sessions. In the second area, that is promoting enterprise and profitable work, institutions highlighted the importance of exhibition events to promote circular economy careers and high-quality guidance. They also specified, funding for business and entrepreneurship ideas that embody circular economy concepts. And they also spoke about the importance of enterprise activation forums to galvanize and incentivize business ideas around the circular economy. And when it came to the third area, which is promoting active citizenship and social inclusion, we heard about the importance of community engagement projects that have research, teaching, and learning components along with entrepreneurial inclinations. And there were also several examples that were given. I'm not going to go into the details now in the interest of time. But yes, basically the post-learning webinar was very energizing for us because after the training, we actually found out how this is going to trickle down to the institutions, the curriculum, and their students. So quickly touching on the last point. So we wanted to see how successful the training was. So we looked at the Kirkpatrick model. So this looks at 4 levels of the training to see how effective a training actually is. So since it's still early days, we have measured only the reaction and learning level. In the first level, we wanted to understand, did the learners actually enjoy the training? So post the training, we actually sent an evaluation form, and we also had, of course, a lot of opportunities during the training to capture feedback. We did hear that the training was very well received, and there were lots of insights that were gathered. And trainers also said that it was a great opportunity for them to network and to meet other like-minded individuals in the same space. We also looked at the second level, which is learning, which talks about did learning transfer actually occur. And over here, we had basically the post-learning webinar was an opportunity for us to actually evaluate this. And what we did find is that the learning transfer has actually occurred, and institutions are able to actually take this and integrate it into their curriculum. So overall, yeah, this was our experience, and we are going to continue to stay in touch with institutions to also measure the impact and the results level. And there's also a brochure on this project in the marketplace if you want to have a look, and we can also chat further later. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shankar, for sharing this very interesting example. I would like to maybe hear from you a bit more about the issue of competences. What are the 2 or 3 key competences that you would identify for learners to really thrive in a circular economy?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think what we see in a circular economy is that it's becoming increasingly important to work in interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary ways. So for instance, if you think about the role of a typical construction worker in a linear economy, they might have a certain role, but in a circular economy, it becomes about not just their function, but also how they interact with different stakeholders across the value chain. So all of the transversal skills that we spoke about, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, all of those become extremely important. I think another skill that's also really important is, of course, we have touched upon this a lot as well, is technical and digital skills. We also see that that is gaining increasing prominence. So in general, I don't have a slide for this, but the T-shaped skills approach is a very helpful way of thinking about the competencies that are important. So the vertical bar of the T basically talks about the depth of skills that are required. So this is more about, what specialist skills will you require? And the horizontal bar of the T is more of a cross-cutting, broader skills that are required. So this generally encompasses things like transversal skills, which are more broad. So what we see in a circular economy is that in addition to the depth, the breadth of skills is also becoming important, because it's important that learners are able to apply these skills in a variety of contexts. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Then let me turn to Dr. van der Weyer. We know that transformations are very complex processes, and the question is what needs to change in both the formal and also the informal TVET sectors to support, and I would even ask to help accelerate green transition and the green jobs creation.
Thank you. I think at the risk of sounding repetitive, again, bringing the social partners in is really crucial. They know what's happening on the ground. They know which technologies are developing or popping up. So bringing them into the TVET institutions, making sure that our programs are aligned with what is happening in the green transition, that's crucial. work-based learning. I hope the leaflet can convince you that work-based learning is important, so I won't go into much detail for that. I think flexibility is also necessary, not only in terms of changing, adapting the content, but also in terms of the delivery. The green transition, the people affected by the green transition are also those already working. They need different types of learning. They need more flexible provision, online learning, modular, micro-credentials. So formal TVET definitely needs to become more flexible for that. Teachers and trainers, I mentioned it before, very important here. We've heard the example from Malaysia where the teachers can do an internship in industry, and that's something really helps them develop those technical skills. They also need that sustainability mindset, because they are the ones interacting with the students, they are the ones that can also make the students, the learners, develop that sustainability mindset. And lastly, and also related to that sustainability mindset, is giving space in the curriculum to develop that mindset. You've already mentioned before as well, this needs to be developed very early on. Yeah. But we need to nurture it throughout TVET as well. So we need to have space in the curriculum. That doesn't mean that we need a specific module or a specific course. And as you were saying before as well, we need to integrate that across the board in the different courses.
Thank you, Marieke. We have a few minutes left before we close, so let me check if there is any questions online, and then we can come back with another question for the audience. A question online.
Yeah, just one question from Johannes Kioko Mutiku, who asks, would you support a policy where it becomes mandatory for TVET trainers or teachers to spend at least 6 weeks in industry every 2 years to ensure that they are updated?
All right, for which panelist?
It wasn't specified, so anyone could feel
volunteers. That. Anyone wants to talk about mandatory training in industry? What about you, the Brazil experience?
I think we don't have a unique solution for all the challenges. We need a diversity of possibility in TVET training. But I think, for example, it's important for the teachers to be in contact with the industry. I think dual VET or the relationship with industry to update is so important. But we have a lot of possibility, and I think a unique solution for example, for Brazil. Brazil is a huge country. The north, south, the west, east is so different. We have a lot of different productive sector chains, and depends of, for example, in São Paulo, it's a high industry metropolis in Brazil. I think this is possible to do, but we have campus in the Amazon forest, for example. It's how to obligate 6 weeks in the, because the proposal of the TVET index traditional communities in agriculture area is so different, okay? But it's a possibility, but it's not a unique solution.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the principle is accepted, I hear, of training of teachers and having an exposure in industry, but we can't make it mandatory.
I think I
Dr.
can
Langat,
also...
please come in, yes.
Yes. Yeah, I think in the UNESCO project that we've just concluded, we also developed a framework for continuous professional development for teachers that require them to go back to industry to upscale their skills and also to be independent to the new technologies that are happening. Of course, the issue is how it's going to be implemented, because we are supposed to work on this together with the sustainable financing model within the TVET sector, so that even when we require these trainers to go back to the industry, they should be supported by the government or the institutions that are sponsoring them, so that we don't require them wholly to finance their going back to the industry. But it is necessary for them to be able to make up the skills to what is required in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Langat. So this unfortunately brings us to the end of this session already. If you have questions from the audience, I suggest you use the coffee break efficiently. A green transition will obviously not happen overnight. It is a change process. And after 160 years of building up carbon-based economies in this world, it will take several decades probably to fully transit to its zero carbon economies. We only had 1 hour to discuss the key drivers from the TVET sector that could help accelerate this transition. And I thank all the panelists for their valuable inputs and the audience for your participation. I believe you all have deserved a coffee. Let's go for coffee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hubert. That's right. There's coffee now, and then we'll continue with the second part of the session on digital transformation. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I know that was a short coffee break, but we certainly have a lot more to get through, so thank you for joining us back. As we heard in the last session, this is the second part of this discussion about TVET flagship initiatives, including projects by UNESCO and its field offices and its partners. And this discussion will focus on digital transformation. And I would like to hand over to Mona Laroussi, who will be the moderator for this discussion. She is the director of the Institut de la Francophonie pour l'éducation et la formation. Mona, I will give the floor to you, and you might notice that you do have headsets. Part of this conversation will be in French, part will be in English. There'll be a switch between the two. So if you need the translation, please make use of it. Mona.
Okay. We note that the interpreters did not translate from French to English, so we limited to this. Donc, this session will be in French. Donc, on va commencer. Le numérique qui était omniprésent dans notre vie. Je vous laisse le temps de mettre les casques. Juste pour présenter la session, donc le numérique était omniprésent dans nos quotidiens, dans notre vie. Est devenu, après la pandémie de la Covid-19, une nécessité. Et donc ça n'a pas échappé aussi à tous les métiers et à toutes les compétences.
So digitalization has become a necessity. And according to a recent study, 66% of employees are using a computer at work, and there were only 53% in 2013. 62% believe that continued learning prepared them for the new digital world, according to the 2013 report. With the digitalization of all activities, there is a private and public sphere are linked. Now we bring our phone home, and it's like bringing work home, because the digital is as intrudes our private lives. And there's been a major disruption because of this new way of life, which created new skills. Over the past decades, 30% of professional skills have been replaced, which exert pressure on the capabilities of sectors, including technical and vocational training, and also the lifelong learning, because as we know, people who came right before do not have the skills to work with digital tools. So it means that we have to upscale the skills of those who will be recruited, and to improve the skills of those who already were working, and whose skills have to be improved so that they can continue in their jobs. it is urgent that we should use the data to help educators, workers and learners to understand the impact of change on employment and competitiveness so that we can better plan and connect to the labor market. This session on digitalization will put forward current and future initiatives in terms of professional training in line with the priorities of the new strategy. Some projects that are being implemented at the headquarters of the UNESCO will be presented, but also projects that are implemented elsewhere. Cooperations and synergies to support successful transitions will be explained. It is also an opportunity to engage in good practice and to learn about how we can use such good practice and duplicate them in other countries. More specifically, we will discuss the importance of the challenges and the opportunities of the digital transition and other related transitions from the point of view of new digital professional skills and how they are mainstreamed in the professional training. We also discussed the competencies and digital skills in an accelerated phase of the expansion of the economy and what it means for the economy and vocational training in order to ensure that all learners are prepared in an appropriate manner. We will also deal with the best practices and lessons learned to meet the demand of the labor market and society in terms of digitalization and the new digital services to make sure that no one is left behind. To that end, we have among us some panelists. I will start on my left. Ms. Ya Lala from Madagascar, Ms. Tem Leng from Singapore, and Matt Sig Gilman from the Burning Glass Institute. The first two will show us some case studies that are different but similar from Madagascar. Mr. Zimmerman will also make a presentation. I hope that I pronounced your name right. And he will share his point of view on the importance of the data on the labor market. And we will finish with Mr. Robert Okinda to my right and Benjamin Marleux, who will share the way they are working on the project with UNESCO to give training to the teachers to manage digital transformations and how the BICS program with Mr. Marteux works on the development and the follow-up of the youth digital skills. So without further ado, I will now give the floor to my colleague and friends, because we work together, Harry Lala, to present the case of Madagascar.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde. C'est vraiment un plaisir pour moi.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure for me. I am representing Madagascar's TVET, and I will discuss what's happening in our country. So first of all, for those who don't know it yet, Madagascar is a country in the Indian Ocean. It's a large island. Unfortunately, it is ranked among the the poorest countries in the world, although it has loads of natural resources. To name but a few, mine, oil and gas. We are facing major issues in the field of skills development, of human resources, because workers don't have a lot of skills or don't have any skills at all. And private sector is dominating. We have 500 institution for training on the island, and only 70 of them are state-owned, and they only have 40,000 learners. So it is a situation that is very preoccupying, and in 2015 we drafted our first national policy document on employment and vocational training, and we mainstreamed in our first sectorial educational plan the very important element. There are many strategic focuses to implement, but during this presentation I will focus on the merge between the momentum between the partnerships that is very important to improve quality, and one of the crucial activities in order to reform our system, and that is adopting engineering and to adopt a competency-based approach which will underpin the development and the curriculum reform. That reform should include synergies between partners, particularly in the private sector, that should decide on which competencies they need, and our first national policy focused on 5 economic areas, priority areas, that is information technologies, tourism, hospitality industry, textile, public project, and rural development. At the moment, we are in the economic recovery phase, and it is very challenging because of the health crisis, and also because of natural disasters that are occurring almost on a daily basis, cyclones, and they constrain us to close those institutions because of floods, for example, and also the place of digital transformation in this context. We realized after and during the COVID-19 pandemic, we mobilized in order to take into account the importance of mainstreaming digital in order to strengthen resilience in our system. Also, we decided to start training for trainers sessions to train them on information technology, but information and communication technology must they require a change in the way teaching is carried out. So using those technologies is absolutely paramount. With the BEAR project, we started the first session, the first training for trainers session through with the support of the Korean government, but with the support of the European Commission as part of Erasmus+, and the main actor was the University Agency of the OEF. So what are the challenges that we have to address? The inequity, that's the first one, because it doesn't affect the vulnerable, it affects the vulnerable groups in the rural population. That accounts for 82 or 85%. And the digital infrastructure are lacking, almost inexistent, and there are connectivity issues. Our human resources aren't having the right skills. And what are the perspectives? Well, it's a digital policy. There is an interministerial initiative, and the Ministry of Innovation and Digital Development is leading the initiative. We have strengthened what we had already put in place through the Pan-African Initiative for Digital Transformation. It is a UNESCO project, and we are now once again asking for the cooperation of UNESCO to support us to devise a national strategy for digital transformation of our system. And here, before you, we reiterate our commitments made during several regional and national fora, and also at the Paris and New York Summit, to the transformation of education. So what do we commit to? Well, it is twofold: develop new learning modalities, use the information and communication technology, and second, promoting the mass learning in the emerging sectors so that we can ensure the competitiveness of youth in the labor market. And as a conclusion, we are launching a call for synergies in what we do. And we call upon you as our traditional UNESCO partners and others as well. We have to be able to learn from other experiences in other countries. Let's move together to transform education and vocational training in Madagascar. Thank you. Thank you, Lela. All right, so moving on swiftly to the gentleman to my right. 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes, yeah. So once again, thanks for inviting me to share the experience by Temasek Polytechnic. I think first and foremost, I would like to thank Sarah and the BLIT team for giving me this opportunity to share the BLIT projects and also some of the things that we're doing. Can I have the slides up, please? Thank you. Just to give a context, the Temasek Polytechnic, in the European qualification framework, we are pegged at level 5, so which is one level below the university program. So just to provide you that perspective, we offer 3 years diploma programs that are quality practice-based oriented, so that we can provide our students with the skills to contribute the technological and economic development of Singapore. It gave me great pleasure to do a quick introduction on BLIT. Temasek Polytechnic is part of this BLIT family. I find that it's very meaningful to have this platform, as it helps to promote that kind of conversation among the members to talk about how skills development, institution and policy can respond to the digital and green economy. So we talk about how we can encourage the entrepreneurial mindset among our young people, and also how can TVET use migration to support the labor markets gaps and to help labor markets integration. So basically, BLIT operates in 3 regions, Europe, Africa, and Asia-Pac. And the key activities that we operate, which Temasek Polytechnic supports, are greatly bridging innovation and also learning as well. All right, so just to give you an idea of this BLIT projects. So Temasek Polytechnic, we support the 4 commitments. And in fact, I'm very excited to announce that we are looking at the very first sector on tourism and hospitality sector. And actually, it's within this framework that I would like to share with you the innovative approach by TP, which is the Smart E-Commerce Center. Right. Can I have the video clip? As we say, a picture is worth more than 1,000 words, and a video clip definitely worth more than 1,000 words. So can I have the video clip to be up, just to let you have a glimpse of what is this Smart E-Commerce Center is all about.
Some 1,200 diploma students and adult learners are set to gain e-commerce skills from the newly launched Smart E-Commerce Center, Temasek Polytechnic School of Business. This comes as the COVID-19 pandemic accelerated digital transformation in the retail industry.
Let me tell you more about how to shop in Omni.
This robot greets customers when they enter a store, and while shopping, patrons can scan the QR codes on the items to find out more about the product. They're also able to try on clothes virtually. Buying is also made more convenient with a self-checkout station. About 500 Temasek Poly students across various diploma programs and 700 adult learners under the continuing education and training courses will benefit from the training opportunities. Minister of State for Education Gan Xiaohuang says as companies transform their businesses, it is key to upskill workers too.
Process digitalization and technology adoption provides at best only half the solution. The other half that must not be overlooked lies in equipping our workforce with the necessary skills to make use of these technologies. Only by pursuing these twin thrusts in tandem can businesses ensure that they are in the best position to capture the emerging opportunities in this evolving environment.
So, letztens hatte ich ein...
Right, thank you so much. Can I get back to my slides again? Yeah. So that's the Smart E-Commerce Center that we have. All right, so I thought I would like to use the BLIP language, the 3 I's, the identification, integration, and also implementation to share a bit more details on this, the thinking process of this Smart E-Commerce Center. Let me go to the first I, which is the identification. Right, the first I. So the first I, identification, is really about working with stakeholders to look at emerging trends and also to see how training can be more relevant. So it helps to inform the key focus strategies for this Smart E-Commerce Center. So the Singapore government actually launched the industry transformation map, looking at retail industry specifically in 2016. So we call this as ITM. And the whole idea is to transform the industry. And also in fact, this year we have updated the industry transformation map that look at 4 key areas, looking at Singapore brands going overseas, encourage new experiential concept, position the country as a lifestyle hub for global brands, and lastly, to groom local talent for quality jobs. This is important because the industry transformation map provide information to the way that we shape our curriculum. And that brings me to the second point on integration. And after identifying all the key trends and issues that will impact the retail industry, so that really helped us to really translate all this into the way that we shape our curriculum. So in Temasek Polytechnic, we have 2 diploma that responds to this, the developmental needs for the industry, the retail industry. So the 2 diploma programs are diploma in logistics and operation management, and also diploma in marketing. All right, and I'll move on to the third I, which is the implementation. So after knowing that there's a need to respond to the needs for the retail industry, so how does that mean when we look at the way that we implement our curriculum? So through this Smart E-Commerce Center, it will provide students an omni-channel learning environment, consists of unmanned and online stores for students and also budding entrepreneurs to acquire necessary knowledge and skills, so that they can design a similar shopping experience for our customers. So that is in this context, the 3 I's to frame the way that we look at the smart e-commerce center. I'm coming to the end very soon, moderator. And this slide actually shows the various interfaces that our students could be exposed to this omni shopping approach. This includes the front of house, customers experience touch points, and also back of house. And of course, last but not least, as what I mentioned, there's an online version for our students. So the whole idea is to really provide that kind of real-life experience for our students and to infuse that into the curriculum. Hopefully this case example that I've shared in Temasek Polytechnic will give you an idea of how, looking from the bleed angle, looking at the 3 I's, how we can support our students in acquiring the skills that can really respond to the needs, specifically in this case, the retail industry. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, merci pour la course. Bon, comme nous tous, on travaille beaucoup avec la mémoire à court terme, je vous propose qu'on pose les questions aux 2 intervenants avant de passer au 3e. Donc, je vais poser une petite question, mais il y a...
Thank you so much. Thank you for this race. So just like we are saying, we work very often with short-term memory. So I suggest asking the questions, and then the questions will be addressed to 2 of the panelists, and then we're going to ask the questions to the other panelists. So my question is the following. Did you see an important change in the requests of the labor market when it comes to this? Yes, of course. We have noticed from sectoral research and studies that were done by our work with the support of UNESCO and the Belgium Forum, who were responsible for those studies. We had 2 main things to focus on. We noticed that it is very important in all careers that professionals have the necessary competencies and skills. For example, for the tourism sector, we should have courses online. And in those 2, we can find the repertories, and we have identified the needs here. We have also a group of companies who did studies on the employment market, and we do not find enough employees who would want to apply for jobs. Another question, how would you operate when the people are not connected, so they don't have access to internet? That's a very difficult question. This is one of the challenges, and I think that the networks, the networking opportunities, just as mentioned before, the problem is not that they don't want to have access to internet, it's about poverty. They cannot access it. So the trainers always think about ways to share with our peers the resources that we have. We cannot use our own laptops, so there should be several measures to help those people to hold different trainings. We have to have the necessary infrastructure for those trainings. So that's why I said I don't know what the projects have to focus on, but the fact is, the reality is that there are many technical issues. So the idea is to be able to solve this technical and digital fracture that we see and the digital gap. Thank you. I will ask my question now to my colleague on my right.
Right, thanks moderator for the question. I think this is a very good question. Just now I mentioned about the Smart E-Commerce Center. Actually, we are very much guided by this national program, which is called the Industry Transformation Map. It was first launched in 2016 focusing on 23 sectors in Singapore, and one of which is on the retail industry. And this industry transformation map, or ITM, is conceived in partnership together with the industry partners. So government did not work alone, but work very closely with the partners, with the industry partners, to see how they can work together to build this retail industry. Similarly for other sectors as well, including built environments, hospitality and tourism, so on and so forth. So that is at the national level, that's this framework that we can take guidance from. And in that framework, they also look at specifically what kind of skills that we need to equip our workforce to meet the future trends in this retail industry. So with this, we take guidance from this ITM. That's where we infuse that into our diploma program. And through this Smart E-Commerce Center, we provide that kind of real simulating working environment for our students, so that when they finish their education with us, they can almost hit and run very immediately, effectively in the company that they'll be joining. So that is the journey. So the point that I want to drive across is that it's very important that this has to work in tandem with the way that we look at skills that can meet the industry needs. We cannot do that in silo without consulting the partners, without working with the industry partners. You have to work together to come up with a curriculum that are relevant and that will help to support the industry development in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And now on va passer à la distance,
we're going to move now to our participants online. Mr. Matt Siegelman.
Merci, directrice La Russie. Bonjour tout
Thank
le monde.
you, dear La Russie. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to take part in this discussion. I will continue my intervention in English.
I'm great pleasure to join this discussion. This is a critical moment, and Directrice La Russie started us off on a very important fact, which is the pace of change with this disruptive technologies today, which is accelerated during the pandemic. And this creates very significant challenges for developing effective and agile TVET systems. What I'd like to do is share with you a few data points that I think can help anchor this discussion and the specific challenges today, but I think as well some of the opportunities that come from having the kinds of responsive systems that were featured with Temasek. So I'll share my screen, and here we are here. Okay, so I'll start here. As we heard at the start of the conversation, over the last 5 years alone, you see 37% of the skills of the average job the average occupation have been replaced. That's actually accelerated significantly. So I think our original analysis had looked at 30% over the course of a decade. That's now considerably higher. That's a market average, obviously, and so you can imagine there's some certain kinds of jobs where literally the top quartile of jobs in terms of their transformation effect have seen over 72% of their skills replaced in that same period of time. Of course, if you were to ask yourself if the average TVET program, its curriculum has changed, 37% of its content has changed in the last 5 years, of course, the answer would be no. There's a couple of things that are fueling this. We're used to understanding this kind of transformation at the level of technological change. And certainly you'll see a good deal of that, and you can see that featured on the left side of this page, what we refer to as skills of mass disruption. These are sets of emerging technology skills that are changing extremely rapidly in demand. You'll see here artificial intelligence, machine learning skills, cloud computing, and product management, which is what I'll call a quasi-technical skill, all with dramatic changes, all indexed to current year. And you can see dramatic changes in demand just over the past 5 years. So this notion that new technologies are driving change in how jobs come to be defined is certainly an important trend. But I think the bigger transformation is what you observe on the right. You see, it's not just that jobs are absorbing new technologies. Jobs have always done that. But what we're seeing is that those technologies are transforming a broad range of jobs outside of the core functional area in which they exist. Let's take the example of data science jobs. If you were looking at data in the United States, you would see that a decade ago, there were actually only, in the entire United States, 150 job openings for data scientists. Last year, there were, I think, about 50,000. So certainly big transformations of these kinds of new jobs that are being created. But the bigger story here is not the demand growth for data scientists, but the demand growth for data science skills, from about 17 occupations representing about 300,000 job openings in 2011 to about 81 occupations with intensive demand for data science and analytic skills, representing 1.2 million openings. So you're seeing skills that are spreading across the market. And that's a special challenge for TVET systems because very often those skills right now live in different silos. The other set of challenges that's emerging here is that the overall motor of our economy is changing. So we're seeing new sets of economies, things like the readiness economy, the logistics economy, the green economy, the remote economy, the automated economy, all emerging, creating tens of millions of jobs. But those jobs also require new sets of skills that are unaccustomed. I apologize, this thing on the left is hard to see. It's tracking key skill demands of some of those emerging economies. It's not actually a COVID spike protein, though it may look like it. If you were able to read it, which I know you can't, what you'll see over here at 3 o'clock is the demand for industrial big data analytic skills. Now, I'm a student of the job market. Before I saw this analysis from my team, I was unfamiliar with the term. And yet we see here that in the US alone, again, a demand expected of 600,000 job openings requiring industrial big data analytic skills just over the next 5 years. How do we create people trained in those sets of skills? At the same time, as we start to parse out some of those new economies into their various components, recognizing that, for example, in the world of automated technology, automation in healthcare looks very different from autonomous vehicle research. If we then look at each of those and say, what are the skills, what are the jobs, and therefore the skills that are needed, one of the things that also creates a challenge is that even where we see jobs that we're used to seeing, here I'm pointing to software engineers, nothing surprising about the fact that we need a lot of software engineers in autonomous vehicle development. But what is surprising is that the skills that are needed are actually not typical software engineer skills. Things like robot operating systems, deep learning, SLAM skills, not typically required among software engineers. So even where we see existing jobs, we're going to need to have a significant infrastructure for upskilling people in those jobs. I'll conclude with this last idea, and that's that, and I think which underscores the importance of having effective labor market observatories at a granular skill level, is that when we can understand the skills of roles, we can understand the skill alignment between roles, and therefore where there are more efficient training paths. One of the problems that we face today in creating effective reskilling programs is that we're always trying to train people up from scratch for a new role instead of building on top of the skills that people already have. So you can see here on the left, the example of leveraging skill-driven analysis to be able to bring greater equity into labor markets. If you see the example of payroll managers who tend to be lower paid, 80% of whom are women, they actually have a fairly high skill correspondence with a finance manager, of whom were better paid, only about 42% are women. There's a discrete set of skills that separate those jobs when you can unpack each of those jobs to their skill DNA, their skill genome, if you will. Budgeting skills, financial analysis skills, risk management skills. Train a payroll manager up in those skills, and she unlocks a set of opportunities in finance that are better paying and that bring greater equity to the market. You see the same thing in critical emerging technologies. Here's an example of the cybersecurity spectrum, where many countries are struggling to reinforce their cybersecurity. A business analyst who's a lower paid position than a network engineer can capitalize on many of the same foundational skills, build a few cloud-based skills, and make an effective transition. So thank you so much for the opportunity to join this conversation, and I look forward to our discussion.
Merci pour la présentation. Quand vous comprenez le français, je vais peut-être poser ma question en français.
Thank you very much for the presentation. As you understand French, I will ask my question in French.
Bon. Ma question, en tout cas, merci beaucoup pour l'analyse de l'étude et surtout le schéma qui illustre très bien les compétences, les besoins et la tendance. Et c'est très important d'avoir tous ces dans un même schéma. C'est excellent. Et ma question, ça concerne les données. Donc, pourquoi est-il important d'avoir des données? Et lorsque nous parlons de système de formation et de compétences, quel est le lien entre données, compétences et formation? Merci.
Data, skills and training. Thank you.
First of all, apologies for the little gap there. I was not fast enough in shutting off the translation mode. But I would say, first of all, this is an excellent question because, you know, I think what I would speak to here about the importance of data is a couple of fold. First of all, I think this is a question of both timeliness and of granularity, both of which are critical in being able to develop agile responses to rapidly changing labor market conditions. We have a tendency right now in the world of TVET to whipsaw, to overproduce people, and then we wind up with an excess of talent in a certain area, and we're constantly trying to play catch up. And so the key to being able to have greater effectiveness in a time of great dynamism is the ability to make sure that we can be both more predictive and more responsive. So how can we be able to, at really understand what are going to be those changes, and how do we then create processes for launching programs, for evaluating programs that make sure that they are very up to date in terms of their curricular structure. That depends not only on the timeliness of data, but I think actually even more significantly on the granularity of data. If you were to look at, for example, we were talking a minute ago about autonomous vehicles. If you were to look at how the skills that are needed, one of the key occupations in autonomous vehicle production is a mechanical engineer, not surprisingly, as in any kind of automotive manufacturing. But a mechanical engineer who works in autonomous vehicles you don't just cut and paste one skill onto her job. What you're actually seeing is that when a mechanical engineer is using those skills, is involved in that autonomous vehicle manufacturing as opposed to other vehicle manufacturing, most of the skills of her job change. And so that level of granularity that can look at specific sectors, can look at specific geographies and understand the nuance is going to be key to making sure that the workforce we have can be the workforce that we need going forward.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Maintenant les deux
We will
présentations
now
qui suivent et on
listen
posera les
to
questions après.
the next
Comme les deux
presentations, and
présentations
we will
traitent de
ask questions
compétences,
afterwards.
donc je donne la
As
parole
both presentations
au
focus
début à
on
Monsieur Robert
skills, I will
Okinda
give the floor
du
to
Commonwealth
Mr.
of Learning.
Robert Okinda
Et après, ça
from
sera
the
Benjamin
Commonwealth of
Marteau et on
Learning,
posera les
and
questions
then I will
après.
give
Donc, à
the
vous la
floor to
parole.
Benjamin Marteau, and then we will move on to the Q&A. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, moderator. It's a pleasure for me to join this panel. And It's a pleasure for me to be here to be part of this session, and we are happy that TVET, that UNESCO is launching this TVET strategy, and this strategy is very important as we go into the future where skill systems are affected so much. So. Sorry for that.
Next slide, that's right.
Okay, so I'll start by talking briefly about Commonwealth of Learning.
Go back, is right.
Okay. Sorry for that. It has gone off.
L'échange n'est pas bon.
The PowerPoint slide has gone off. Okay. So I'll proceed. I'll start off with maybe talking briefly about Commonwealth of Learning, and then I'll talk about a project that we are implementing together with UNESCO-UNEVOC. So Commonwealth of Learning is an intergovernmental agency that is headquartered in Vancouver, Canada, and it is the world's only intergovernmental organization that is solely concerned with the promotion and development of distance education and open learning. I basically had the Skills for Work initiative at the Commonwealth of Learning that mainly focuses on use of distance education and open learning in technical and vocational skills development. So we partnered with UNESCO-UNEVOC to implement a project in sub-Saharan Africa, and in that particular project we focused on two countries to start with. That was the Gambia and Zambia, and in that particular project we started with determining a baseline on the status of implementation of TVET during the COVID period, and that laid the basis for the transformation that we are trying to bring about. So in that particular study, we got several aspects that affect TVET systems. One, we got that quite a number of the TVET institutions implemented TVET training during the COVID period, but there are quite a number of challenges that they experienced. One was on cost of training was too high, especially for the girls, the women, and the people living with disabilities and those who are marginalized in one way or the other. The second aspect that was a challenge was on access. Sorry, the first one was on access, second one is the cost, the third is on the quality and relevance of the training during that particular period of time. So these are actually challenges that we identified, and then we worked with quite a number of TVET institutions to develop their strategies for implementation of TVET. So the main focus was on transformation of the digital, maybe transformation of the TVET systems, and we supported development of the strategies. In the Gambia, we targeted 10. We managed to get 6 strategies. In Zambia, we targeted 10, and we ended up getting 10 strategies. And those strategies are now being validated. We are going to develop a compendium of those strategies so that they can be shared with other institutions. Currently, we are also working with the Caribbean Association of National Training Agencies, CANTA, to do the same in the 11 countries in the Caribbean. And the purpose mainly is to ensure that TVET systems are prepared for the future that is a bit tricky. We realize that currently there's an unbalanced skill structure within our systems, and it's not easy for the TVET system to produce the graduates that the industry wants. And it's not easy also to have a situation where the National Classification of Occupations is not identifying those who have skills in open and distance learning. So we realized that as we implement TVET, we noted that it's important to have the strategies, and these strategies are focusing on transformation of TVET systems. We are focusing mainly on maybe technology, capacity building of the trainers, and we're also focusing on development of materials that are key. So one of the benefits that we've gotten out of the whole aspect is that, for example, in Zambia, the TVET agency and the ministry in charge of education have taken up the project and they are moving on with it. They have already developed maybe a template that is currently being used by TVET institutions in the whole country. So that is one of the positive impacts that we have gotten out of the project. And what is also important that has come out of the initiative is that we have had integration of assistive technologies in TVET training because it was part of the initiative. And we've also had TVET managers being trained on how to manage and lead transformation towards a more inclusive, gender responsive, and sustainable TVET institutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Bon. Je donne la parole à ma gauche maintenant, à Mathieu.
I now give the floor to my colleague to the left, my colleague Mathieu. Could you please
Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. Bonjour à
very
toutes
much
et à
for the
tous.
invitation.
Je vais vous parler d'un projet, d'une plateforme qui s'appelle PIX. Et voilà. Donc, PIX, qu'est-ce que c'est? Le projet PIX, c'est parti en 2017 d'une initiative publique-privée demandée par un certain nombre de représentants du monde du travail en France, qui a rencontré le ministère de l'Éducation nationale, le ministère du Travail et également des représentants des salariés autour d'une idée, c'est que les compétences numériques, et on l'a vu d'ailleurs dans les présentations qui ont été élaborées, les compétences numériques transverses, celles qu'on utilise tous dans nos vies professionnelles, familiales, citoyennes, elles sont de plus en plus importantes. Que si on n'agit pas là-dessus, on risque une fracture au sein de nos sociétés ou entre les pays d'ailleurs derrière. La mission qui nous a été donnée, c'est vraiment que chacun se sente à l'aise avec son environnement numérique tout au long de sa vie. C'est concrètement, qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est une plateforme en ligne qui est accessible gratuitement. Je regarde en particulier Boris Chakroun, que je remercie parce que sans lui ça n'aurait pas été possible. Accessible sur pix.org dans une version francophone, une version anglophone aujourd'hui. Ça rend trois services de manière très concrète. On fait des évaluations, des tests qui peuvent vous dire où vous en êtes en termes de compétences numériques. Vous pouvez aller essayer. Le but, c'est pas d'évaluer pour évaluer. Le but, c'est d'essayer d'évaluer pour motiver les apprentissages et ensuite d'accompagner le développement de compétences. C'est quand même la finalité. Et la troisième chose que l'on fait, c'est qu'on valorise ces compétences avec un certificat qui peut être reconnu par les États ou par le monde professionnel sur ces compétences numériques qui ne sont pas celles que le collègue du Burning Glass Institute présentait, qui sont des compétences métiers. Là, on est sur des compétences dont chacun peut avoir besoin dans son métier, qui a une part de numérique toujours croissante. C'est vraiment pour tout un chacun. Hop. Voilà. Alors, la plateforme, elle est pour tous, élèves à partir de 10 ans, pour des étudiants, donc des élèves également évidemment de la voie professionnelle, pour toutes les voies et également pour le FTP. On a pour les étudiants, également pour n'importe quel emploi, pour n'importe quelle personne, y compris des personnes qui peuvent être âgées, qui peuvent être en difficulté avec le numérique. On est parti d'un référentiel européen, je sais qu'il y a des gens de la Commission européenne dans la salle. On est parti d'un référentiel européen et qui est également très très proche du référentiel qui a été élaboré par l'UNESCO, et donc on assure cette jointure-là. C'est des questions d'information et de données, de communication, de collaboration, de protection et de sécurité, parce que ce sont des enjeux très importants quand on est dans le monde numérique ou d'environnement matériel digital, avec des niveaux d'exigence qui sont très différents.
demand that can be different depending on the institution.
Voilà. L'évaluation, comment ça se passe? C'est une évaluation, je vais vous montrer une épreuve pour vous donner concrètement une idée. Elle est basée sur des défis. Ce pas juste des QCM, des questions de savoir habituelles, c'est aussi des défis parce que c'est aussi comme ça qu'on pense que les gens peuvent apprendre et tester efficacement. C'est des tests qui peuvent être un petit peu amusants. Et on a un algorithme adaptatif de test qui fait que quel que soit le niveau que l'on a, c'est essentiel, on peut avoir une expérience d'évaluation qui est acceptable. C'est ni trop difficile, ni trop facile, juste assez pour challenger. Une épreuve PIX, c'est ça, c'est un exemple. Dans quelle année l'astronaute Roberta Bondar est né? Alors, ce n'est pas une épreuve d'histoire. Vous ne connaissez probablement pas Roberta Bondar, quoique on ne sait pas. Vous allez chercher et vous allez rapporter la réponse. Et donc, c'est ça le concept de PIX. On est sur une épreuve de recherche d'informations. On fait chercher de l'information, vous pouvez aller chercher où vous voulez, et vous avez accès pour ce type d'épreuve à Internet, évidemment. On a 3 stratégies apprenantes qui vont derrière. Une fois qu'on a mesuré votre niveau, on essaye de vous faire progresser au travers des défis qu'on vous pose. On vous recommande des tutoriels très précis en fonction de ce que l'on a vu, que vous savez faire ou pas. Et on outille aussi les enseignants, parce qu'il ne faut pas oublier, on est plateforme en ligne, mais en réalité, si on n'a pas les enseignants avec, on passe à côté de l'essentiel. Et donc on a un outillage dédié aux enseignants ou par exemple aussi au service des ressources humaines en entreprise. Et à la fin, vous avez un joli certificat officiel qui vise à favoriser votre employabilité. Aujourd'hui, on a un peu plus de 9 millions de comptes qui ont été créés, autour de 5-6 millions d'utilisateurs actifs par an et 2 millions de certifications qui ont été passées, principalement dans le contexte français, mais notamment, et encore une fois, merci à l'UNESCO d'avoir cru dans le projet. On a 2 versions linguistiques. Donc on a une version linguistique francophone, et je salue les collègues francophones qui sont dans la salle, je sais qu'ils sont nombreux, et une version anglophone. On va travailler à d'autres versions linguistiques qu'on a développées dans le cadre de projets portés avec UNESCO, soutenus parfois par l'Union européenne, et afin aussi d'être utile dans le cadre de la Global Skill Academy. Alors PIX, et je terminerai mon propos là-dessus, attention. C'est une initiative publique française, mais l'idée dès le départ, parce que les compétences numériques, ce sont les mêmes, parce qu'on a besoin des synergies que vous évoquiez tout à l'heure pour arriver à être utile au plus grand nombre. Elle a été conçue dès le début en partant de cadres de référence qui sont internationaux ou européens et qui sont pensés pour être partagés avec d'autres pays qui le veulent, avec d'autres institutions internationales, pas dans une logique d'export, ça ne nous intéresse pas, mais dans une logique de partage et de co-construction de liens communs numériques mondiaux. Et c'est vraiment quelque chose auquel on croit beaucoup. On peut être utilisé par toutes les structures du monde TVET en français et en anglais, et on serait ravis d'ailleurs si jamais il y avait des personnes qui étaient prêtes à venir, mais c'est pas juste utiliser, c'est utiliser et travailler à la co-construction et à l'évolution derrière, sachant qu'évidemment on travaille en relation avec les enseignants ensuite. Voilà, un grand merci.
Merci. On n'a plus le temps. I have one question from here, one question, 1 minute, and just 1 minute to conclude. So for my question to Mr. Okinda, now all youth people use a lot the do-it-yourself video. So how this do-it-yourself video can develop skills and how this new way of learning impact the delivery of TVET?
So videos are very key in terms of delivery of TVET systems, and we have tried to do quite a lot in this area. For example, we build capacity of trainers to use virtual labs that they can develop on their own. And we also had a situation where we are building capacity of trainers to use video, especially in engineering areas, because during COVID period, it was a challenge to implement TVET. Quite a number of the trainers were able to train maybe aspects like business studies, communication studies, computer studies, but when it came to engineering areas, it was a bit of a challenge. So we are advocating for use of videos that trainers can generate on their own using locally available resources and materials. And this is part of the way with which we are trying to foster resilience of the TVET systems, because it may be a bit of a challenge to come up with maybe virtual realities, mixed reality, and so on, augmented reality in developing countries. But it is imperative to start small with do-yourself videos that are easy to work on, mainly using mobile phones that most of the trainers and trainees have. So I think that is the way forward, and that is what you can use to start.
Merci. Essayez d'avoir une petite réponse très courte, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much.
Donc ma question c'était par rapport à cette plateforme qui est excellente, qui prépare les jeunes aux métiers d'avenir, qui implémente les compétences. Mon problème c'est toujours les personnes qu'on oublie, qui sont en Afrique, qui sont non connectées et qui on est en plus dans une situation de fracture énorme du numérique, et le numérique ce n'est pas qu'Internet, on est d'accord. Donc est-ce que votre plateforme est accessible à des personnes non connectées pour qu'ils acquièrent les compétences du numérique?
Alors, merci beaucoup pour cette question qui est hyper importante. La question de la non-connexion, elle ne se résume pas à l'Afrique. On le déploie partout en France. Le sujet, il n'est pas que là. Premier point. Et le deuxième point, en fait, il y a certaines parts de l'expérience sur la plateforme qu'on ne peut pas faire sur Internet, c'est clair. Par contre, il y a des usages pédagogiques qui peuvent être faits. De ce que l'on fait, on essaye de les favoriser. Un exemple, toutes les épreuves que vous voyez, là je vous ai montré une épreuve qui nécessitait d'aller rechercher de l'info. Donc forcément, c'est en ligne, mais il y a d'autres épreuves qui ne le nécessitent pas, et on permet aux enseignants, par exemple, de s'en saisir pour, dans le cadre, ou des formateurs, dans le cadre de leur cours, dans le cadre d'activités de classe non connectées, de pouvoir se servir comme des supports pédagogiques. C'est comme ça qu'on fonctionne pour le moment, et qu'on a réussi un peu à commencer à résoudre cette équation de manière certaine, parfaite.
Merci. Donc, merci à tous les intervenants. C'était une séance un peu costaud parce qu'il y a 5 intervenants et chacun veut parler. C'était légitime que chacun veut parler. Donc, si on résume la session rapidement, le numérique a pris beaucoup de place. Le numérique a intervenu partout. On doit changer notre manière de travailler. Il y a de nouvelles compétences à faire acquérir à tout le monde pour pouvoir travailler dans ce monde-là. Et pour cela, on a beaucoup besoin de données. Et ça, c'est très important. Et je pense qu'on doit avoir les données en temps réel pour pouvoir réagir et ajuster tout de suite. Et puis aussi, les compétences sont là. Il y a beaucoup de plateformes qui travaillent sur la modélisation des compétences. Et je pense que la meilleure chose à faire peut-être après cette session, c'est de pouvoir échanger, de voir dans quelle mesure on peut ne pas refaire les expériences, mais compléter et travailler sur des expériences qui sont déjà là. Je vous remercie.
Thank you to our panelists and to Mona for moderation. I know it's not easy to get in presentations in such a short period of time, but thank you regardless. We are going to, in just a moment, wrap up what we have heard already over the past day and a half now. But first, we have a poll that we wanted to put to our participants. We wanted to ask you some of the questions that we thought would be central to guiding the process forward now with this new UNESCO TVET strategy. So we're going to put up now on the screen a QR code that's going to come up, and with that QR code, we'll just ask you to scan it and answer questions on Mentimeter. Probably if you've been to a conference before, you've used Mentimeter, I imagine. Here you see the website as well. If you're too far back to get that QR code, it's menti.com, and then you'll see the code there for this conference. Please log in because we want to try to gather as many responses and tabulate as many responses here as possible. I'll read the questions out that you'll see once you arrive. So we're going to wait for the first question to be put up on the screen, which I'll read out to you as soon as that's popped up. It's not scanning. Okay, could we maybe darken or brighten the room, either way, to make sure that this can be scanned? Yeah, you can also head to the website as well. And I'll give you the codes for the questions. If you go to mentimeter.com, you will also be able to log in. I can give you the code for the first question. This is the first question here, and the code is 6352-3136. I'm going to repeat that. The code for the first question is 6352-3136. So this question that you see on the screen that we'd like to put to you is, what are the most significant challenges that you would like to address with the help of TVET in the coming years? I'll repeat the question. What are the most significant challenges you would like to address with the help of TVET in the coming years? You'll see a number of choices there that you can pick from, and we will tabulate your answers to see which are the most significant issues, challenges rather. We'll give you a moment to respond to that. Let's see if we already have some results. Yes, we do. Yeah, there we can see. I'm having a hard time saying this. I have to jump over here. So you can see here, green and sustainable transition, thank you, Wilson, has 39%. So that's seen by you, our participants, as perhaps the greatest challenge that you'd like to address with TVET in the coming years. And the second greatest challenge you can see here is technological changes. These are two issues that came up over the course of the conference the past day and a half, quite a bit in our panel discussion. So clearly these are ones that have resonated with you as well. So we can see some of the answers are still coming in, but I think it's quite clear that green and sustainable transition and technological changes are the two biggest or most significant challenges that you would like to address with the help of TVET in the coming years. I think we can move on to the second question. So I'm going to ask for the QR code for the second question. I'm going to read the code out to you as well, 49525621. Again, the code for the second question, and I'll ask that the QR code be placed up on the screen as well, 49525621. We don't see it on the screen yet, but I'll start to read out the question to you. What kind of roles do you expect UNESCO to reinforce in the coming years? What kind of roles do you expect UNESCO to reinforce in the coming years? And there you see it on the screen as well. A number of choices there, and we'll start to gather your answers. You can see we have a choice of 5 answers, and it looks like, so far, provision of national, regional, and global policy learning opportunities. Certainly something UNESCO is in a good position to help with. And also capacity development of TVET stakeholders. That appears to be another quite popular choice, and I think evenly between provision of protection tools and guidance documents, as well as strengthening the network partnership. So fairly even answers here. We'll let you continue to answer if you haven't had the chance yet. But indeed, it looks like those are the top 2 answers there: provision of national, regional, and global policy learning opportunities, and capacity development of TVET stakeholders. I'm going to keep that screen up to allow the answers to continue to trickle in, and I would ask that we now move on to our closing remarks, and Borhin Shakrun, who you've already heard from, the director of the Division for Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems at UNESCO, will synthesize essentially everything that we've heard, and he's pulled the short straw in having a very short amount of time to wrap up everything that we've heard. But Borhin, I'll give you the lectern.
Many thanks, Sumi, and I think we can say good afternoon by now. So good afternoon to all colleagues who are in the room, but also colleagues who are joining us online. You're giving me a very difficult task, but I will try. First of all, I would like to not synthesize, but more, what are the takeaways that I think are important for us and that we would like to take to implement the strategy. And I see for now 5 challenges or 5 issues. And I must say TVET is at that crossroads that is very important for us to recognize. Let me start by the first one, which comes in a way from the PON. We have to work to have a future-ready technical and vocational education system. And that future-ready system have to be resilient to shocks like the one we have lived with the COVID, but also climate change and other shocks. But it has to be future-ready for the changes in the labor market, as we have heard from Matt and other colleagues about the demand for skills. The governance, the way we would like to govern them. But I think it's very important, and I mentioned this in the beginning, I would like to insist about it. TVET is not just a linear or a response to labor market change only. It's about industrial economies, it's about social changes. So it's the future ready. It doesn't mean just responding and understanding what is happening in the labor market here and now. It's that more comprehensive capacities. And that's why we insisted in the strategy to look at individuals' needs, economies, and societies. And I think it's more complex than just a match of skills, demand, and supply. The second aspect, which is related in reality to the first one, and the trade-offs that we can have between very job-specific type of qualifications and vocational training, and a vocational training that is broad and can respond to changing labor market demand, and a very dynamic change, and putting a more lifelong learning perspective on it. It's a trade-off. And in some cases, probably, there is not one fit-for-all answer. In some cases, you will have to prepare people to get very specific job and get the skills to enter the labor market. But in others, probably you will have to have a broader set of qualification that include foundational learning, that include transversal skills, and you take this trade-off. And it's about the engagement with the labor market, with the economies, with local communities, as we mentioned that. But a third, I would say, challenge or crossroad matter that we have to take, given what I just mentioned, is the fading, I would say, borderlines between initial and continuing training. Until now, we were considering that people will have to have a full qualifications and get into the labor market, and then potentially they can get additional learning opportunities. We see that the initial training can evolve, that the continuing training is evolving very fast. And this distinction is becoming probably problematic and less relevant for future-ready TVET, is how we can combine this different perspective and how we can place TVET in a lifelong learning perspective. I think this is something that we would see, and we spoke about micro-credentials, we spoke about validation of prior learning, we spoke about the informal and formal learning and community learning centers, etc. So this dimension of the link between initial and continuing training seems to me a third aspect that we have to take. The fourth, and again, is related to this point. We have spoken and we have heard a lot about excellency and or excellence and center of excellence. If we are taking a social justice and an equity agenda, then we have to speak about excellence for all. There cannot be excellence for some and low-cost TVET for others, or low-quality TVET for others. So I think the notion of excellence has to be revisited with this social equity and inclusion dimension. And the question is, and I think Hubert mentioned, is how excellent centers can lift up the regional centers, the local community centers, and how a system, as part of this future-ready system, can take up all the system and upgrade it. How excellence applies for all, and not only for the happy few, that will benefit from investment, will benefit sometimes from donor support, will benefit from a sector investment, and others will remain at a regional or local level without that attention. So I think it's a matter of equity and inclusion that is important. But it's related to that is, can TVET be also a driver for international cooperation and solidarity? And that's what an organization like UNESCO is advising and driving for. It's about the multilateralism in a situation where we see tensions all over the world. And TVET should be a unifier, should be a tool for solidarity and cooperation, and not a divider among us. And I think this is very important in the discussion we had. This is very important through UNESCO-UNEVOC network, through UNESCO Chairs Network, through ASP.NET Network, through other networks that are important, that are part of the, I would say, the infrastructure of UNESCO. These are the ones that can help advance this cooperation and solidarity. And UNEVOC is the right vector, at least for vocational education and training, to be that vector of cooperation, solidarity, and insist on solidarity, because we are not only in competing for markets, we are also in a multilateral platform where we would like to come together. Now, the strategy is not a blueprint for reform. It doesn't say what each country has to develop as a specific reform, but it gives still a framework. And the framework is what I mentioned earlier, is are we taking care of the individual's pathways and having a right-based perspective, accompanying the individual's journey, accompanying people and advantaging the disadvantaged. It's about, again, an equity agenda that we would like to see. But it's also about economic development and growth. And again, it's about social tone. So it's not a blueprint. No country can take the strategy that we are launching and say, oh, this is my reform. It's more a framework for thinking technical and vocational education and training and making it ready for the future. And that's why, for us, this is a work that we would like to do with others. And I would like to mention the work, and we have in the room the interagency group. We don't see this as UNESCO's endeavor alone. In any case, UNESCO is member states. But it's about collaborating with the interagency group. It's about, of course, UNEVOC. It's about also what we can create through this type of event and this type of opportunities. Well, let me say that we are very pleased to launch the strategy in Bonn because the UNESCO-UNEVOC International Center and the network, but because also since 20 years now, we have support from the German government in advancing technical and vocational education and training since the beginning, since we had the Berlin Congress in 1989, and since we launched the program on TVET. So I would like to thank the German government. There are many entities, of course, starting from the policy entities, from BMBF and BMZ, with their support and their political portage that we need, but also all the partners through GIZ, through BIBB, and other entities that are actively engaged with us in Germany. And that collaboration is, of course, very important for us. Let me thank the teams that have prepared this conference, the team here at UNESCO-UNEVOC and all the colleagues who contributed. We got volunteers as well from the different German organizations, from also the UN campus here, and of course our team in Paris who worked very long and very hard to get you all here, to get this very important meeting for us and conference to launch the strategy. Thanks to the interpreters who helped us communicate and engage with the others who can speak in different languages here in presence, but also online. And thank you very much, and we stay in touch. The strategy is just starting, and we look forward to continue collaboration. Thank you very much.